Hello lovers of Westeros, Ashley of Naath here. This video is going to be a follow-up to my Gerald Dane Secret Agent Darkstar video. Wow, I'm totally realizing that this follow-up is being released before the original, so that's no good. I'm gonna have to do this intro on the fly, but it's 2K19, let's roll with it, right? Anyways, in that first video, I posit a reason from my perspective why I think it is that Gerald Dane does a very horrible thing, and in this video, I'm going to present another reason why I think he did that horrible thing. I still believe all of the stuff that I'm going to put forth in the other video, however, I think that this is also a valid reason, possibly, and is definitely worth exploring, so here we are. Now, in case anyone forgot or has not read the books, the Darkstar attempts to kill Myrcella, but thanks to a skittish horse, he only maims her, cutting her cheek down to the bone and slicing off her right ear. The question everyone is asking is, why did he do this? After the attack, Ser Gerald eludes capture by Areo Hota's men, so it's not like anyone can ask him. However, I think I know the answer. Vengeance, justice, fire and blood. Now, what would the Darkstar want vengeance, justice, and fire and blood for? Well, the same reason the rest of the Sand Snakes want those things. The death of their father. Yes, you heard it right. I'm suggesting that Ser Gerald Dane, aka the Darkstar, is the son of Prince Oberyn Martell, Red Viper of Dorne. When the thought first occurred to me, it did seem pretty tinfoil, but upon further investigation, it's really not. Let's begin with what first set me down the path of this theory, a quote from Tyrion. When Tyrion greets Prince Oberyn upon his arrival to King's Landing, Tyrion reflects on what he's heard of the Red Viper, thinking in part, it was said that he bedded men and women both, and had begotten bastard girls all over Dorne. The Sand Snakes men called his daughters. So far as Tyrion had heard, Prince Oberyn had never fathered a son. That's a peculiar word choice, so far as Tyrion had heard. To state the obvious, the implication is that Oberyn could have had a son, only Tyrion didn't know about it. For me, that was George's way of opening the door to that possibility. This may seem nitpicky, but allow me to elaborate. While watching a video on another channel, I believe it was Joe Magician, and it was his video on Daenerys' house with the red door. If you don't subscribe to him, go do that. Go watch that video. It's awesome. I came across a snippet of an interview from Anne Growell, George R.R. Martin's editor, in which she explains George's revelation strategy in his writing. She says, "Now that I've realized his threefold revelation strategy, I see it in play almost every time. The first subtle hint for the really astute readers, followed later by the more blatant hint for the less attentive, followed by just spelling it out for everyone else. It's a brilliant strategy and highly effective." So we see that words really do matter, and something seemingly insignificant, such as using the phrase, so far as he or she knew, so far as so-and-so heard, could actually be a big deal. It might be a subtle hint from George for the astute reader. That is why my curiosity is piqued by such tiny details, and yours should be too. And once again, I want to make it perfectly clear, I did not discover that information on my own. I am not trying to claim any sort of anything about it. I don't even like mentioning it because I've seen it in someone else's video. I just really need you guys to understand why people with channels nitpick on this kind of stuff, and that was the perfect quote. So, hats off to the original source, Joe Magician. Moving on from that soliloquy, there was another quote that I saw differently after rereading the Tyrion quote that contributed to my suspicions about the Darkstar's paternity. It reads, "This is how you start a war, not with a crown of gold, but with a blade of steel." To put this quote into context, Ser Gerald said this while pointing out to Arianne that her plan, this coup that she's staging, isn't going to work because it'll take more than an empty gesture to provoke Cersei. To start the war she wants, Arianne would need to kill Myrcella. Bearing in mind the Tyrion quote, I realized that the Darkstar isn't saying anything different than Oberyn's other kids. In A Dance with Dragons, Obara says this to her uncle Doran. "Give me back my spear, uncle. Cersei sent us a head. We should send her back a bag of them." In A Feast for Crows, Nymeria tells Doran, "Only royal blood can wash out my father's murder." Then in A Dance with Dragons, she tells Illyria, "It ends in blood as it began. It ends when Casterly Rock is cracked open so the sun can shine on the maggots and the worms within." In A Feast for Crows, Tyene tells Doran, "War, though not my sister's war. Dornishmen fight best at home, so I say let us hone our spears and wait. When the Lannisters and the Tyrells come down on us, we shall bleed them beneath the blowing sands as we have 100 times before." Again, the Dark Star's quote had a standalone context, but when compared to what the Sand Snakes say, we can see Sir Geralt expresses the exact same sentiments, but he does them one better and acts on his feelings. If he were the Sand Snake's brother, it would stand to reason he'd want to avenge his father's death just like they do. Perhaps these similarities are more of those subtle hints from George for the astute readers. So we have George seemingly laying the groundwork for Oberyn to possibly have a son, and we've established a possible explanation for the shared attitudes of the Sand Snakes and Sir Geralt, vengeance and justice for a slain parent, which goes to motive in his attack on Myrcella. Let us now examine how their, Sir Geralt and Oberyn's, physical appearances and personalities stack up. Sir Geralt is said to be handsome and by one account said to be the most beautiful man in Dorne. He's clean-shaven with an aquiline nose, high cheekbones, hair that's collar-length, thick and silver, divided by a streak of black, and he has angry dark purple eyes that appear black at times. Oberyn is described as tall, slender, graceful, and fit, having a lined and saturnine face with thin eyebrows, black viper eyes, and a sharp nose. Oberyn's hair is shiny and black, with a few silver streaks, and recedes from his brow into a widow's peak. Now, we have no description or mention, for that matter, of what the Dark Star's mother looks like, so it's impossible to say what of his features are hers, but there are some commonalities with Oberyn. For starters, the hair color. We know the Danes have Valyrian features, or they can, so that accounts for Sir Geralt's silver hair. However, the black streak could come from Prince Oberyn, who's noted to have that lustrous black hair. Next, let's look at the eyes. The Dark Star has dark purple eyes, something we can attribute to House Dane's Valyrian-like features. However, Arianne tells us that Sir Geralt's eyes can seem black to those who've never seen them up close. I can't talk today, guys. I'm sorry. This too could come from Oberyn, whose eyes are described by Tyrion as being as black and shiny as pools of coal oil, and by Areohota as being as black as night. Interestingly enough, there's another attribute of Sir Geralt's eyes which he could have inherited from Oberyn. Princess Arianne doesn't stop at saying Dark Star's eyes are dark purple. She says that they're, quote, dark and angry. At one point, Areohota tells us that Obara Sand has angry, close-set eyes, and also reflects that all of Prince Oberyn's daughters have his viper eyes and that the color doesn't matter, meaning that though the Sand Snakes may have different eye colors, they all have the same viper-like quality to them. Seeing that Areo first notes all the Sand Snakes as having their dad's viper eyes, then later refers to Obara's as angry, I'm taking viper eyes and angry eyes as being two ways of saying the same thing. So what we have here is Arianne noticing something in Sir Geralt's eyes that is precisely the same thing Areo notices of the Sand Snake's eyes, a characteristic they all inherited from their father. Speaking of traits from Oberyn, it's possible that he passed good looks to Sir Geralt. Remember, Sir Geralt is said to be the most beautiful man in Dorne. While nobody outwardly says this of Prince Oberyn, we can infer that he's pretty good looking, judging off his physical description and the number of women who want and do bed the guy. Also, there's some evidence to suggest Oberyn's looks led his niece Arianne to very creepily fantasize about him sexually when she was younger. If the Dark Star is Oberyn's son, it would be sort of an odd way to explain her attraction to him. She has a thing for dangerous, dark-eyed, well-built men. The Dark Star possesses each of these characteristics just like Oberyn. What attracted her to the father also attracted her to the son. Just something to think about. Let's now examine the personalities of Sir Gerald and Oberyn. Oberyn was ever the Viper, and Sir Gerald is more a Viper than Oberyn ever was. Oberyn was deadly, dangerous, and unpredictable. Of Sir Gerald, it's said, the Dark Star is the most dangerous man in Dorne. Oberyn describes himself as having a vile tongue. Arianne describes Gerald as having a cruel mouth and a crueler tongue. Both men also display a degree of arrogance that they can both back up. When Doran tells Oberyn not to provoke Lord Tywin before Oberyn goes to King's Landing, Oberyn responds, "When have I provoked any man, unduly? You would do better to warn the Lannisters against provoking me." When cautioned about where he walks in a particular area due to the unmilked viper population, Sir Gerald responds, "I was weaned on venom, Dalt. Any viper takes a bite of me will rue it." Of a quick aside, being weaned on venom suggests a strong familiarity with poisons. That's a strange area of expertise for a member of House Dane, as nobody in that house has a noted proclivity for poisons. It makes a lot of sense, however, if Sir Gerald were to have spent time around Oberyn, who's renowned worldwide for his knowledge of poisons. And the only reason Sir Gerald would have spent time with Oberyn is if he were Oberyn's son, in my opinion. And Oberyn either went to High Hermitage to visit him, or they linked up somewhere else in Dorne. To get back on track, we can see that Prince Oberyn and the Dark Star have some things in common personality-wise. So we have Sir Gerald acting like a viper, talking like a viper, and kind of looking like a viper. But is it possible for him to be a viper as per the timeline in the story? Let's have a look. In A Feast for Crows, Sir Gerald is in his late 20s. At the time of his death in A Storm of Swords, Prince Oberyn was in his mid-40s. So Oberyn could definitely have a child Sir Gerald's age. But what of Oberyn's whereabouts almost 30 years ago? Oberyn answers the question himself in A Storm of Swords. When talking to Tyrion during his trial, Oberyn recalls to Tyrion the time he went to Casterly Rock just after Tyrion's birth. "Do you recall the tale I told you of our first meeting, Imp? It was not for your tale alone that my sister and I came to Casterly Rock. We were on a quest of sorts, a quest that took us to Starfall, the Arbor, Old Town, the Shield Islands, Craycall, and finally Casterly Rock. But our true destination was marriage. Dorian was betrothed to Lady Malario of Norvos, so he had been left behind as Castellan of Sunspear. My sister and I were yet unpromised." Tyrion is 26 or 27 currently, so this means nearly 30 years ago, Oberyn visited Casterly Rock as part of this marriage tour, and on this tour, Oberyn puts himself in Starfall. So, knowing full well that Oberyn loves the sex, it's not crazy to imagine that he got it in with a woman of House Dane while he was at Starfall. The Dark Star is in his mid to late 20s, so he's the exact age a child would be were it conceived at the time Oberyn was in Starfall. Pardon this horrible pun, but the stars couldn't align better. Sir Gerald could definitely be Oberyn's son per the timeline. I'd like to return to Sir Gerald's statement that he was, quote, weaned on venom. Recall how I mentioned this implies that he's familiar with poisons, and that seems odd for a member of House Dane, but it would make sense were the Red Viper the Darkstar's father. So Oberyn would have had to have taught Sir Geralt about poisons at a time when he was old enough to learn. Well, assuming Sir Geralt was born in 273 AC or 274 AC, he would have been of school age, i.e. a learning age, during Robert's Rebellion, and according to George R.R. Martin, Oberyn's whereabouts during the rebellion are unknown. It's also noted that post-rebellion, Oberyn rarely left Dorne. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that during this time, Prince Oberyn visited High Hermitage often or somewhat frequently to wean his son on venom and teach him how to fight like he did with all of his daughters once they became of age. Because remember, Prince Oberyn armed all of his kids so that they need never be defenseless. In the spirit of transparency, we should now discuss some of the questions this theory raises. For starters, who of the Dornish main players know that Sir Geralt is Prince Oberyn's son? Obviously, per the nature of this video, Sir Geralt would know, as my contention is his attack on Myrcella was motivated by vengeance and justice in the name of his deceased father. I believe Oberyn knew and believe Prince Dorian knew as well. Prince Dorian knowing actually puts a few seemingly innocuous statements into context. For one, he tells Arianne that the Darkstar is the most dangerous man in Dorne and that she'd done them all harm by involving him in her coup. Now, what I think he means by this is Dorian obviously would know that Geralt is Oberyn's son. Arianne does not. And Prince Dorian also knows the attitudes that all of Oberyn's other children have. They're warmongering, they're talking about all these plans that they want to enact to try to force a war between Dorne and the Iron Throne. However, Prince Dorian is not ready to go to war with the Lannisters yet, so he locks the Sand Snakes up in a tower, and aside from Sorella, the only child, if this theory is true, the only child that he does not detain would be the Darkstar. So I think that he was kind of hoping that the Darkstar would stay far, far away from Myrcella so that the Darkstar didn't have an opportunity to do what he ended up doing. Because Arianne, in her brilliance, offered the Darkstar the opportunity to spark a war, offered that right up on a silver platter to Sir Geralt, and he took full advantage. And that's exactly what Prince Dorian was afraid was going to happen, and that's what he meant by the Darkstar being dangerous, in my opinion. There's also a time where Arianne pontificates if Sir Geralt would be a good spouse, and she thinks how her father would question her good sense if she married Geralt. How ironic would it be for Dorian to be against this because his daughter would be unknowingly marrying her own cousin? These sorts of unions do occur in Westeros. I believe Tywin Lannister and his wife Lady Joanna were cousins. But as best as I can tell, these unions don't occur within House Martell, at least not in recent generations. So of course Dorian would question this, which brings me to who doesn't know, Arianne Martell. I think if she knew, she would have said so in her inner monologue, especially during her time in confinement because her scheme basically goes to hell, someone rats her out, and in one of the most epic and spectacular scenes in the books, which I won't ruin for you, everything is just blown to smithereens fantastically, and her ass ends up detained and locked up in the same tower as the Sand Snakes. And when she's in there, she starts thinking about if Sir Geralt is the one who ratted her out. And I think if she knew that he were Oberyn's son, we would have heard about it at that point. Also, I doubt if the Sand Snakes would know. Doran and Oberyn kept them in the dark about a lot, so I couldn't see them disclosing Sir Geralt's identity. Another question this theory raises is this. If Sir Geralt is Oberyn's son, why didn't Oberyn claim him like he did his other children? Admittedly, I don't have a great answer to this. All I have is my speculation. My speculation is that the Darkstar's mother could be married, had this fling with Oberyn, and got pregnant with his baby. And to save herself and her house shame, she didn't tell her husband, or she did, and they're both passing the child off as theirs. Given that Sir Geralt has House Dane's features, This would be easy to do because he'd favor his mother and there wouldn't be a reason for anyone to question anything. Not unlike Ned being able to pass Jon off as his because Jon had Stark looks as opposed to Targaryen looks. Anywho, it wouldn't be as easy for Oberyn to take a child in that scenario as it was for him to take, say, Obara, whose mother was a drunk, unwed prostitute that Oberyn smacked across the face before taking her daughter. This leads perfectly into this theory's next question. Why is Sir Gerald's surname Dane when this theory should render it Sand? While many Dornish customs differ from those in Westeros, one thing they keep with is the naming of bastard children. So again, this theory should render Sir Gerald's last name Sand. However, if my previous speculation were correct and Sir Gerald's mother is passing him off as she and her husband's, he would have the last name Dane. This would have to mean that Sir Gerald's mother was the inheriting female of high hermitage because in Dorne, inheriting women's last names are passed to their children instead of the name of their husbands, and the women can keep the last name that they have. Now, this can't be confirmed, nor can this possibility be dismissed because House Dane's family tree remains a mystery, particularly the High Hermitage Danes family tree, given that Sir Gerald is the only known member of it listed in the time span of the events in A Song of Ice and Fire. Another possibility remains, albeit a remote possibility, which could explain Sir Gerald's last name. He could be a legitimized bastard of Prince Oberyn and the unnamed Dane woman. I see that playing out like this. In the year after Robert Baratheon took the Iron Throne, he sent his Hand of the King, Jon Arryn, to Dorne for 2 reasons. To return the bones of Prince Oberyn Martell, and to broker a peace with Prince Doran. Prince Oberyn, outraged over the murders of Elia and her children, had been attempting to raise Dorne for Viserys Targaryen. Jon Arryn and Prince Doran brokered some type of a deal because the uprising was quelled. Perhaps part of that deal involved legitimizing Prince Oberyn's son Gerald. Again, there's no text to support that, and I noted it was a remote possibility, but because it is possible, I wanted to put it out there. Something else that's problematic for Oberyn being the Dark Star's father is Oberyn is said to have deeply despised the Dark Star, which seems odd considering Oberyn seems to be a pretty decent father to the Sand Snakes. According to Sir Daemon Sand, Oberyn's one-time squire and rumored lover, Sir Gerald is more viper than your uncle ever was. Prince Oberyn could see that he was poison. He said so more than once. It's just a pity that he never got around to killing him. Daemon makes it sound like Oberyn was mulling the thought of killing Sir Gerald, though we never hear Oberyn directly say from his own mouth that he wants to. Apparently, Oberyn also harbors some animosity towards Gerald. Both of these things would be odd if the Red Viper is indeed Sir Gerald's father. Couple of thoughts on this. First, if it's true that Oberyn has said these things, perhaps the fact that Oberyn hasn't killed Sir Gerald yet could be because Sir Gerald is his son. Actually, the more fitting statement there would be that prior to Prince Oberyn's death, the Dark Star could have been allowed to live because Oberyn knows that that's his son, so as much as he dislikes him, he can't do anything about it. Oberyn wouldn't be the only character to despise his bastard son either. We see this with Roose Bolton and Ramsay Snow. Roose admits that Ramsay has bad blood, and he knows Ramsay will kill any of Roose's children from Fat Walda just as he murdered his first son, Domeric. Roose poses this question to Theon. Tell me, my lord, if the kinslayer is accursed, what is a father to do when one son slays another? Oberyn could be in the same position as Roose, knowing that he has a shitty-ass kid, but there's nothing he can do to solve the problem. My second thought on what Daemon says is that maybe Oberyn did tell Daemon these things, but it was a facade. We know Ned allowed people to believe a lot of things to maintain Jon's cover. Oberyn could have been doing the same, albeit for different reasons. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those reasons had to do with the scheme he and Doran might have had going. We know Oberyn and Doran worked quite closely, we just don't know to what end. So I can't rule out that they might have had some sort of higher purpose for concealing Sir Gerald's paternity. Also, as I proposed earlier, Sir Gerald's mother could be married and passing him off as a child of her marriage, so to maintain that cover, Oberyn says what he has to do at any given time so as not to arouse suspicion. I'd like to mention one last odd and end that didn't really fit in any other section of the video. In A Feast for Crows, when discussing the conspiracy with Arianne, Sir Gerald approaches her from behind. When Arianne turns to look at him, she observes that Sir Gerald stood behind her, half in starlight and half in shadow. Now, this could mean something, or it could mean nothing. To me, it sounds like a low-key hint at Gerald's parentage disguised as a scenery description. The half in starlight description could be a reference to the Dane in Sir Gerald. As we know, their sigil features a star, their main castle is called Starfall, and House Dane's ancestral sword Dawn is said to be forged from a falling star. The half in shadow description would be a nod to the Martell in Gerald. House Martell's seat, Sunspear, is flanked on its western side by the Shadow City, the closest thing to a true city the Dornish have. Again, it could be nothing, but it seems like something to me. In closing, I acknowledge that Oberyn being the Darkstar's father rests almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, an offhanded recollection from Tyrion, shared viper-like eyes, and similar political ideas as the Sand Snakes. If Sir Gerald had a widow's peak, I'd feel a lot better about the theory. All the same, this theory being true could build this story in some meaningful ways. For one, it could explain why Darkstar attacked Myrcella. In addition, it explains another event in the story which is presently misunderstood. And lastly, Gerald being Oberyn's son could confirm the identity of a mysterious character roaming around in the story. Unfortunately, I can't elaborate on those last two ideas because both will be addressed in their own videos. But enough of my opinions, I'm more interested in yours. Let me know your thoughts on Oberyn being the Darkstar's father, and as always, like and subscribe for more content. I'm Ashley of Naath, thanks for watching.